because it's a major challenge of our time. How do we live? Where do we live? We can't just build individual houses all over the countryside if our population continues to grow. The future lies in mega cities. We're going to see a lot more very big cities. If the world population is going to grow, and it looks like it's going to grow for quite some time to come, it really needs to grow in cities, not all over the countryside. And that's more sustainable than the alternative, but it does create big challenges. So with big transport challenges in particular, how do you get about the city? So we're going to need underground systems, public transport systems, and also between cities. How do we shift goods from the countryside to the city and between cities? And that's growing all the time. I mean, the number of trucks has doubled in the last 20 years in Europe. The number of truck kilometres of freight transported, it has doubled. If it doubles again in the next 20 years and the 20 years after that, I mean, our roads will be just full of trucks. So we need to find new ways of transporting things. We need trucks to drive much closer together. They will be intelligent, they may be driverless, they may be connected together electronically to form almost a train. That would be one solution. Trucks probably need to get bigger and heavier. That creates other challenges. The bridges are going to need to be stronger. The pavement is going to need to be able to take that. Of course, rail is a solution in many cases, but not in Ireland, because in Ireland our distances are really not long enough to justify a comprehensive freight rail service. We're more likely to use rail for passenger transport and use the roads. In Europe, rail will feature quite strongly, but again there are conflicts between passenger rail and freight rail. Freight rail needs to be cheap, tends to be slow, as it is in America. Freight is quite successful in rail in America. In Europe, we have a focus on passenger rail transport, and that conflicts a little bit with the freight requirements. So in Europe, rail freight is not growing. Road freight is growing massively, and that's putting more and more trucks on the road. So we need to find new ways of dealing with this. We already have some mega trucks, some people call them, much bigger and longer trucks, and a lot of countries are moving towards longer and heavier vehicles. So your standard 5-axle semi-trailer, as it's called, may have a second semi-trailer at the back. So you'll have a 5-axle truck would now become an 8-axle truck. They've been on trials in several countries in Europe now for 10 years or more. And they're actually environmentally good. They reduce damage to the pavement. They reduce the carbon footprint of the freight transport. They're just a little bit big and frightening for people, but they are actually environmentally friendly. Well, our interest is transport, and that's being driven by the need for sustainability, which most people accept now is necessary, and the advances in electronics and computers. So our transport is becoming a lot more intelligent. So in the past, we've had ever increasingly clever cars. They're getting a lot more electronics, a lot more sensors in them, and the infrastructure was relatively stupid. So we're now getting more intelligent infrastructure. So we're now moving towards bridges that would have a lot of sensors on them that will be relatively smart. We're working with drones to inspect the bridges, flying underneath them to see are they okay. They deteriorate over time, so we're trying to get extra out of them. We're trying to better understand their true safety. We're looking at embankments as well. So embankment stability, landslides is a big issue. So again, we're trying to understand the problem better, know which ones are at risk, identify them in advance, and then you get less disruption, less likely that the train will be cancelled or the road will be closed. Ireland is a little unusual, and Ireland is an island. It's at the end of a big continent. Our freight transport, for example, is not really going anywhere except to or from Ireland. So we wouldn't focus on Ireland that much. Our interest is more on continental Europe, so most of our research work is funded by the European Commission. So we would be looking at the global challenge. You know, how do you get freight from Europe to China or vice versa? How do you sort problems of getting things from Scandinavia to Spain? And that means what do the highways of the future look like? And, you know, you probably have smart vehicles that are talking to each other, that are perhaps driving within centimeters of each other because they're electronically controlled. They could be driverless. This is the future. And I think you'll see a lot more convergence between road and rail. You'll see roads that look quite like railways because the convoys of trucks will look like trains. You might even see trucks driving on railways. Yeah, so we're talking about bridges. So we're putting more sensors on bridges. We're trying to better understand the true safety of bridges. We're trying to detect damage in bridges because they deteriorate over time, and also sometimes they're bashed by vehicles passing underneath. So we're trying to detect them using sometimes sensors installed on the bridge, but more often now we're trying to do things that are less disruptive and less expensive. So things like you could have a sensor on a bridge without very much electronics, and then the electronics could be in a vehicle that would drive over the bridge, and that vehicle would interrogate the bridge as it drives over it. In that couple of seconds it would be downloading data about the condition of the bridge and will be able to tell us that the bridge is indeed safe. It's very useful after an earthquake or a hurricane. You can do a quick drive over your network and establish that it's safe for the rescue vehicles to go back in there. Yeah, we're also looking at embankments. Embankments can slip, so you can have soil can land on the railway or on the road. Equally, the railway can subside, and that's a lot to do with moisture. It's got to do with it rains, moisture moves slowly into the embankment. If there's too much moisture, it gets unstable. If there's too little moisture, it actually can get unstable as well. So we're monitoring moisture levels in these embankments. We're also looking at the geological conditions and trying to see if they're susceptible to future damage. So we're also looking at roads. So roads is the poor relation of the transport infrastructure. They're relatively inexpensive, but there's so much of them that they're very important. And some roads are now very busy. So getting roads to a point where we don't disrupt traffic as we maintain them or as we inspect them. So we're working on methods of inspecting them more efficiently. So we're developing very complicated vehicles that drive over the road that have laser vibrometers that can detect deflections and can detect the stiffness of the road to see is it getting soft, is it moving in response to passing vehicles, especially over soft soils. And this is an Irish issue actually because we have a lot of peat, so we have a lot of these soft soils. So these vehicles are now coming on stream, and we're working at making them better all the time. Vehicles that could inspect the road as it drives by. Just do a drive-by every month or every 2 months. We're also doing work on crowdsourcing, using something like a smartphone in people's car or on the train that can detect the condition of the road that the car is driving over or the track that the train is driving over. And you can use this information. So it's quite inaccurate, but you get so much of it that that makes up for the inaccuracy of any one measurement. So overall, you can get quite good information about the condition of the track or of the road. The biggest problems, there are big problems in materials. There are real challenges in developing sustainable materials. Concrete and steel are both highly carbon-intensive materials. Steel requires a huge amount of energy to make it, and there's a limited amount of it available. You can recycle steel, but again, it's quite energy intensive. Concrete is a very carbon intensive material. The making of the cement releases carbon apart altogether from the energy requirements. And aggregate is a non-renewable resource, so stone, aggregate is made from stone. That's a non-renewable resource. And concrete is the second most used material in the world after water. It's in volume terms, it's used a lot. And bitumen then, road pavement, road surface, that's bitumen, that's a byproduct of the oil industry. So we need to find alternatives to all of these things. We've made some progress. You can use ash now as an additive to cement, which can replace a lot of cement. So we're making some progress. You can use recycled materials in pavement, in concrete. You can use recycled materials in road pavement. You can add things like glass to road pavement, and it works quite well, but limited amounts. So we have a lot more work to do there. It has given us a focus. I mean, a traditional academic in the conventional way would just explore things that interest him or her, and you kind of wander through life exploring what you come across. With something like the Earth Institute, it gives us a clear focus. So we have to decide what are our themes, what are our priorities, and then work together to focus on those and to really make a difference in a small number of niche areas. And this gives us more impact besides every individual doing bits and pieces that interests them. So I think we're more effective as a group because of the Earth Institute. We're focusing more, and we have more impact by working together. I mean, the biggest problem in the world is the elephant in the room is population growth. We cannot keep growing the world population like we've been growing it. I mean, we've had massive increases in world population, and there just isn't enough capacity. Fortunately, with technological developments, we've increased our ability to deal with large numbers of people. So we have grown capacity, but we cannot do it indefinitely. We cannot keep doubling our world population over and over. So our world challenge, I think, is to stop growing the population.